The spreadsheet on my desk showed Elias Thorne's schedule for the next 3 weeks in meticulous detail. 8 months as his executive assistant had taught me that in this world, the world of high-stakes art dealing, precision wasn't just appreciated. It was survival. Every appraisal, every shipment, every purchase agreement carried a weight that extended far beyond catalogs and receipts. I adjusted the collar of my off-white silk blouse and reached for my tea, now cold after 2 hours coordinating tomorrow night's annual gathering at the Gilded Archive Gallery. The Thorne family hosted this event every November, a carefully orchestrated display of value and influence, disguised as an exhibition. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia, my old college friend who still couldn't understand why I worked for a man whose name appeared in whispered conversations and antiquity theft reports. "Coffee this week? Feel like I haven't seen you in forever." I quickly texted back a promise to check, knowing I would probably cancel. Sophia asked too many questions I couldn't answer. Noticed too many things I tried to hide. The distance between us had grown naturally over these 8 months, like an old piece of art slowly losing its original color. "Miss Vance." Elias's voice cut through my thoughts before I saw him. Deep, controlled, with the faint trace of an Italian accent that became more pronounced when he was frustrated or impatient. I looked up to find him standing in his office doorway, filling the frame with the kind of presence that made the gallery, even with its high ceiling, feel smaller. Dark hair, perfectly styled, a tailored dove gray suit emphasizing broad shoulders, and those eyes, forest green, currently fixed on me with the intensity of someone who never accepted anything less than total control. "Yes, Mr. Thorne. The list of patrons for tomorrow. Walk me through it again." I gathered my tablet and followed him into his office. A space of dark wood and steel that smelled faintly of sandalwood and aged archive paper. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan. The city sprawled below like a treasure he oversaw through pedigree and strategy. 340 patrons confirmed, I began, pulling up the document on my tablet. The 5 largest European collectors have all confirmed. The Sterling family will be here, meaning Victor Sterling will bring his eldest son. It will be the first public appearance for Eric since the incident on the Riviera. Elias nodded, pouring himself a small glass of rare whiskey, despite the clock showing barely 11:30 a.m. He never drank before sunset unless he was under extreme pressure or about to enter a confrontation. Gallery security. Damien has assigned 40 men, all in discreet gala attire, mixed in with the service staff. The surveillance system will be monitored by 3 rotating teams. Rigorous background checks on all catering staff. And, of course, the gallery's personal security detail will be positioned at all emergency exits. Good. He took a slow sip, the whiskey burning in his throat, as his gaze drifted toward the city view. I'd learned that his silence was louder than any command. This silence carried a tension suggesting dangers older and deeper than any art exhibition. "You will stay near the marble room tomorrow. No wandering off alone to the Greco-Roman antiquity wing or the terrace." It wasn't the first time he'd given me instructions that felt more like the voice of a protector than a boss. "Is there something about the Sterling Consortium I should be concerned about?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't look at me. "There is always something to fear in this business, Cora. But tomorrow, you will be safe. I will guarantee it." The way he used my name, with that soft roughness in his accent, always sent my pulse into an erratic rhythm. I repeated to myself, nerves, not attraction. You didn't succumb to a man who viewed the world as an auction where everything had a price. "Speaking of which, what will I wear?" I asked, steering the conversation back to superficiality. He set down his glass and finally looked directly at me. Truly looked. The kind of assessment that made me hyper-aware of every inch of my skin. "There is a dress at your apartment. It should have been delivered this morning. You bought me a dress." I procured appropriate attire for my executive assistant to represent me well at a critically important event, he corrected, his tone dry, but something like a forbidden warmth flickered in his green eyes. If it doesn't fit or you dislike it, there is a number on the card. The boutique will send alternatives. It was an exclusive design, in emerald velvet. I should have started an ethical debate about my boss clothing me. Instead, the only thing I managed to say was, "Thank you, Mr. Thorne." Manhattan was not just concrete, glass, and financial flows, it was an ancient labyrinth of influence and secrets, and the Elias Thorne empire was its most dangerous jewel. The gilded archive gallery, with its prestigious Park Avenue address and its stock of Western masterpieces, was merely the polished casing. Behind the porcelain facade, Elias dealt in a world of dubious artifacts, treasures he moved through secret international routes, and whose value was sustained not by museums, but by the insatiable demand of collectors willing to ignore the law. He was a modern baron of the black market for antiquities, a master strategist who treated legal codes as mere suggestions and rivals as obstacles to be removed. I swallowed, feeling the weight of my own decision, made exactly 6 months ago. When I discovered the truth, not just tax evasion, but the trafficking of war artifacts, the falsified cargo manifest, the macabre provenance of a rare Egyptian sarcophagus, the logical and moral response would have been to flee as far as possible. I should have reported him. But when I saw the ruthless calm in Elias's eyes as he orchestrated the silencing of a leak that would have destroyed any other man's empire, I stayed. The inherent danger of his power did not repel me, it electrified me. Staying was accepting a pact with the devil, and the devil was beautiful, ruthless, and made every nerve in my body feel more alive than it ever had in my normal, predictable life. He moved to the center of the room, leaning against the edge of his ebony desk, pointedly ignoring the cold tea I had prepared so precisely. "Personal engagement, Cora? I am your professional engagement, 24 hours a day," he asserted, his voice grave and velvety, reflecting the weight of an unspoken truth. He didn't need to raise his voice to threaten, he just needed to be Elias, demanding the center of my universe. "In my world, that distinction is irrelevant," he countered, his lips curling into a subtle, crystal-sharp smile. "You belong to this gallery. You belong to me, professionally. And any distraction that pulls you away from your obligations is a security risk I am not willing to tolerate." Suddenly, I felt like I was being appraised not as an employee, but as a rare unicum, a priceless piece of art he had acquired and whose safety he could not afford to compromise. "Your security risk is leaving at 5 to meet Eric," I retorted, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks, but keeping my voice firm. "It's a casual dinner with a college acquaintance, Mr. Thorne. I have no intention of divulging state secrets about artifact acquisitions." His green eyes slowly descended over my body, lingering on my silk blouse and the severe cut of my black skirt suit. It wasn't a common inspection, it was an intense assessment, looking for vulnerabilities or the promise of what the emerald dress would reveal. His scrutiny made my body, accustomed to discretion, suddenly self-conscious, as if I were being painted on a master's canvas. "Eric," he repeated the name slowly, savoring it with displeasure. "I did not like him. He exudes cheap ambition. Tell me, Cora, what do you plan to reveal about yourself to this man who is stealing my productivity hours?" The question, laden with professional jealousy and something much more forbidden, hung in the air, transforming the elegant office into a stage of intimate tension. "My personal life is not a subject for risk assessment," I replied, my voice firmer than my racing heart. The line between assistant and something more had been thin for weeks, but now, with Elias so close, it seemed about to break. "And my plans with Eric will steal nothing but my own time." One corner of Elias's mouth lifted, but without humor. "You speak of own time as if it were a limitless resource. In this gallery, Cora, time is influence. Time is acquisition. Time is control. And your time, by extension, carries a greater weight than you seem to grasp." He took a step toward me, closing the distance between us, and I caught the subtle scent of his cologne, sandalwood and something metallic, like danger. "So, you consider a business dinner with a longtime colleague, who is an occasional buyer, a theft. I consider anything that distracts you from your purpose here a detour. And detours, in my world, are always expensive. His hand found the small of my back, the touch a hot coal through the thin silk of my blazer. You belong in this orbit, Cora. Do not stray from it. His statement was the clearest confession he had ever made, that I was his, at least in his mind. And, terrifyingly, a part of me didn't want to argue. Before I could reply, the office door opened without a knock, and a tall man with brown hair and piercing blue eyes entered. Damien Hayes, Elias's director of security and his most loyal right-hand man. I had spoken with him dozens of times, coordinating security logistics for shipments and events. Elias, Dr. Alistair wants a final review of the exhibition catalog before printing, Damien said, his usual efficient tone. Then he turned to me with an easy, warm smile. Cora, you look stunning this morning. That color really brings out your eyes. Thank you, Damien, I replied, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks and the tension in the air triple. Elias's hand squeezed the small of my back, an almost painful pressure, and the possessiveness radiated from him like a palpable heat wave. Stay where I can see you, he murmured, so low only I could hear. His green eyes were razors, cutting Damien before fixing on me with an intensity that stole my breath. Then, he moved away, Damien at his side, as they walked through the office, discussing the catalog. I felt like a newly discovered masterpiece, whose market value had just soared, and Elias Thorne, the greatest collector of all, had just staked his claim. I managed 3 steps toward the gallery exit, determined to prepare for dinner with Eric and shake off Elias's suffocating presence, before his voice reached me, no longer the controlled tone of the boss, but a commanding timbre that froze me in place. Change into what, exactly? I turned, exasperated. 6 months of his demands, his silent criticisms, and the rare praise that arrived like a glass of fine wine. 6 months watching him interact with sophisticated patrons and auctioneers, each more elegant than the last. 6 months pretending that the heat radiating from him, the way he brushed past me while handling documents, or the way he called me into his office late at night and I caught him looking at me with a devouring intensity, was insignificant. Clothes, Mr. Thorne. It is generally frowned upon to go to a business dinner without them. The muscle in his jaw jumped, the only visible sign of his escalating fury. You know what I mean, Cora. I walked back, suddenly tired of the interrogation. Something that honors you, I said, my voice sharper than intended. Something that makes me feel worthy of the gilded archive. Is that acceptable to you? Or do you need to approve my wardrobe choices as if I were one of your marble busts? For an instant, Elias said nothing. The air in the gallery seemed to vibrate with unresolved energy. Then, be careful, Cora. The men you associate with are not just investors. You have no idea what kind of predators circulate in this city. The concern in his voice, a hint of genuine vulnerability he rarely allowed, hit me hard. I softened my stance, but held his gaze. I'll be fine. Eric is an analyst. Very safe. Very predictable. Predictable people can be more dangerous than you think. They are not as secure as they appear. Not as dangerous as some art dealers I know, I muttered, and regretted it the instant the words left my lips, watching Elias's face close up, all emotion draining away beneath a stone mask. 5:30, he said, his voice now purely professional. I see. Don't be late tomorrow. Dr. Alistair has a deadline. I nodded and fled to the elevator, my heels clicking hastily on the cold marble floor. Adrenaline and the feeling of having escaped a momentary danger, but having provoked the Siberian tiger. The elevator ride down the 30-odd floors of Elias's tower gave me the time needed to restore my composure, but not to silence the turmoil of thoughts. Elias Thorne was my boss. A ruthless baron who controlled secrets and fortunes in the illegal art market. A man who lived in a world of luxury and risk that I rationally wanted distance from. The fact that he made my pulse race and my skin tingle was a distraction, a complication I absolutely could not allow. Eric was safe. Normal. Boring, perhaps. But boring was good. Boring meant I could get a restful night's sleep without worrying about federal agents or rival collectors showing up at my door. Boring meant a future that didn't involve decoding cargo manifests or negotiating the price of stolen artifacts. Boring meant not perpetually feeling like I was suspended on the edge of a cliff, simultaneously terrified to fall and secretly desperate to jump. My apartment, a small studio on the Lower East Side, a 30-minute taxi ride from Elias's tower, suddenly felt small and simplistic after the somber splendor of the gallery. I took a quick shower, trying to wash away the persistent tension of our last verbal confrontation, the memory of Elias's hands on my waist in the office still burning. The emerald dress was hanging on my closet door, where I had left it that morning. It was an item that belonged to Elias's universe, not mine. The fabric was silky, heavy velvet, the color a deep, luxurious green that seemed almost to glow in the dark, enhancing my light brown hair and my eyes. The neckline was modest, but the cut hugged every curve with a precision that made me feel elegantly exposed, before falling gracefully to my ankles. I had never worn anything that felt so intentional, so claimed. I studied myself in the full-length mirror, barely recognizing the woman who stared back at me. With my hair in soft waves, discreet makeup enhancing my features, and the emerald dress transforming me into someone confident and attractive, I looked like I belonged in Elias's world, as if I could walk into any high-level event and command the attention of the most influential patrons. It was a dangerous fantasy. The contrast between the woman reflected and the reality of my life with Elias, filled with codes of silence and disguised fear, was stark. I was about to go on a fake date, dressed in the proof of my connection to the world I should be trying to escape. My phone buzzed with Eric's message, running 15 minutes late. Meet you at the reserve at 8. I confirmed and grabbed my black clutch, feeling the need to be quick before rationality forced me to trade the dress for the safety of jeans and a jacket. This was good. This was normal. Normal people went on dates with kind, predictable men who didn't make them feel like they were constantly walking on eggshells. I needed that taste of normality to convince myself that my future was still mine to choose. The restaurant Eric had chosen, the Reserve, was a high-end dining temple in the financial district, all soft amber lighting, black leather booths, and gleaming silver cutlery. I arrived first, gave my name to the hostess, and was led to a reserved table near a wine rack in the back. The place was crowded with midweek dinner activity, the murmur of conversations creating a pleasant, anonymous hum. I ordered a chilled glass of white wine and waited, people watching to pass the time. Couples celebrating. Business dinners between men in suits discussing figures that were familiar to me. Normal people living normal lives. Blissfully unaware of the parallel world that existed just beneath the surface of their everyday reality. A world where men like Elias Thorne made the kind of decisions that could make fortunes disappear into ancient tombs or artifacts resurface in secret vaults with a single phone call. I was so immersed in thought that I barely noticed when Eric arrived, slightly rushed and sincerely apologetic. Cora, I'm sorry. So sorry. Last-minute market emergency. He was handsome in a clean, conventional way. Light brown hair, friendly eyes, an open, easy smile. His suit was expensive but looked store-bought, not custom-tailored. His smile was charming but carried no danger. Everything about him screamed safe choice. No problem, I said, returning the smile. I just arrived too. Delays are the currency of Manhattan. The date started off well. Eric was attentive, asked about my job, which I answered with vague generalities, having long learned never to mention Elias Thorne's name or the word antiquities in casual conversation. He shared amusing anecdotes about the stock market and cryptocurrency volatility. He was everything a first date should be: polite, interested, appropriate. Then why did I keep checking the empty space on my wrist, as if expecting Elias to have given me a monitoring watch? Why did every dark-haired man who walked past our table, even if it was a waiter, make my pulse jump? Why did I feel, with growing guilt, that I was betraying something, or someone, by being here? The dinner had passed the hour mark, and I was on my second glass of white wine, which seemed to function more as a mild tranquilizer than a social stimulant. Eric was an engaging speaker, detailing the intricacies of a new financial tech startup. The problem, however, was not Eric. The problem was that every story he told about stability, about safe investments, about a future built on ethical principles, sounded not only distant, but almost fake to the reality I inhabited. Elias Thorne's world was the only one that felt viscerally real to me now, with its high risks and constant adrenaline. I laughed politely when he finished an anecdote about the bankruptcy of a careless investor, but my gaze drifted for a moment, returning to the entrance door. I was looking for the impeccable cut of a suit, for the commanding presence, for the icy green eyes that, even in jealousy, had fixed on me with more intensity than any man had ever dared. Cora? Eric's voice pulled me back to the table. Sorry. Long day. Eric smiled, a smile I noticed was perhaps a bit too quick. He placed his hand over mine, a gesture of comfort that, instead of calming me, made me recoil. Elias's hand was a promise of control, but also of protection. Eric's hand was just warm and gentle. You seem tense, he observed, his voice dropping to a tone of complicity. I get it. Thorne, he's an intense guy, isn't he? Always having his fingers in 1,000 different pies. And the gallery, well, it's a complex empire. I subtly withdrew my hand. It's a demanding job, but I like the complexity. And Elias is a fair boss. I defended him instinctively, a reaction that surprised me. Fair, Eric repeated, tilting his head, a calculating look settling in his blue eyes. Yes. But look, Cora. You are incredibly competent. I always admired your precision in college. You are the only person in his orbit he truly seems to trust. And that's where the problem comes in. The conversation suddenly veered into a dark alley. The restaurant's hum seemed to diminish, and the emerald dress, which had previously given me confidence, now felt like a target. What problem, Eric? The problem of opportunity, he whispered, and the smile completely vanished. His eyes briefly scanned the restaurant, as if checking if anyone was paying attention. He leaned forward across the table, and I could smell the expensive wine on his breath. Thorne is about to close the most important deal of his career. The one that will allow him to legitimize the bulk of his collection and finally move into the legal domain. The acquisition of the Baron von Hesse collection. I know this because I am working with the consulting team that is structuring the sale for the Baron. My stomach turned cold. The von Hesse collection. It was speculated to contain lost pieces of immense value, the kind of acquisition that would seal Elias Thorne's name forever. Elias had kept me completely in the dark about this negotiation, a fact that now seemed deeply revealing. I don't know what you're talking about. My job is administrative, I replied, trying to sound cold and disinterested, but the hesitation betrayed my voice. Eric chuckled softly, a dry, mocking sound. Cora, please. You are the master key to Thorne Enterprises. And I know that in the digital archives you organize, there is a folder codenamed Ouroboros. It is the complete cargo manifest for the von Hesse collection. I don't need the market details. I only need 2 dates and 2 names of the intermediaries who are organizing the transport in Monaco. That information would give me a day's head start on Elias's team. I could destroy the deal or, better yet, control it. He took my hand again, and this time the touch was not gentle, it was a purchase attempt. We can do this together, Cora. You don't have to be trapped in his shadow, deciphering his crimes. You are the smartest person I know. Give me that information and I guarantee you a vice president position in my new holding company, outside of Thorne's jurisdiction, with a salary that triples yours. You would be safe, rich, and finally free of his web. There it was. The proposition of betrayal. Eric didn't want me. He wanted the information that made me valuable to Elias. He was using me. And worst of all, Eric, the safe and predictable man, was revealing himself to be an even lower predator, using the facade of a romantic dinner to commit a corporate crime of epic proportions. My contempt for him boiled over. Elias's danger, at least, was honest. Eric's danger was sneaky. I just remembered, I said, pulling my hand back with surprising force, and the sound of my movement scraped against the linen tablecloth. I have a last-minute market emergency. I grabbed my clutch and stood up, the emerald dress swaying around me like a silk armor. You made a mistake, Eric. I am not a negotiator. And I am not for sale. I left him sitting there, wine glass in hand, his face pale and shocked, as I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking like a war drum. My only priority now was to return to the gallery, back into the orbit of Elias Thorne, where danger was known and betrayal, punished. I burst through the doors of the reserve feeling the cold Manhattan night air as a welcome slap, contrasting with the suffocating, treacherous warmth of the dining room. The emerald dress now felt less like armor and more like bait, confirming exactly what I had become in Elias's world, a valuable asset. I did not go home. Instead, I took the first taxi back to the Gilded Archive Gallery, the only place I knew I would be safe from the new predator who had just revealed himself. As the taxi sped down 3rd Avenue, my phone vibrated incessantly with messages from Eric. Cora, please call me. I'm sorry. And then, the veiled threat, you are getting involved in a much bigger game than you imagine. Thorne cannot protect you from everything. I arrived at the gallery before the annual party began. The lobby was filled with catering staff and Elias's security, all in the final preparations. Damian Hayes, Elias's director of security, was near the marble room, coordinating the guards' positioning. He saw me, and the surprise on his face gave way to immediate concern. Cora? What happened? Your date. It ended early, I said, trying to control my breathing and the rage simmering beneath my skin. Eric Sterling revealed himself to be a competitor's pawn and tried to bribe me for information on the Von Hess collection. Damian's face instantly went cold and hard. Professionalism gave way to dangerous loyalty. The bastard tried to recruit you? Sterling violated the treaty. He immediately grabbed his radio. Marco, activate surveillance on the Midtown perimeter and reinforce internal guards. And prepare the red alert code. Send an intelligence gathering team to the reserve immediately. I need proof of the contact. I stopped him with a touch on the arm. No, Damian. Not red. Not yet. Elias needs to know first. He quickly led me through a service corridor to Elias's office, who was already dressed for the evening, impeccable in a black tuxedo that seemed designed to sculpt power. The Manhattan night lights shone through the windows, but Elias stood in the center of the shadow, adjusting his cufflinks. He turned, and his forest green eyes scanned me, taking in the emerald dress, my breathlessness, and the tension next to Damian. His posture immediately became alert. What happened? Why are you not at your engagement? He was not an engagement, Elias, I said, walking near his desk and dropping my clutch there. The sound echoed in the luxurious silence. Eric Sterling is a spy. He staged the dinner to buy me. He wanted the transport dates and the names of the intermediaries for the Von Hess collection. The change in Elias was instantaneous and absolute. His eyes turned into precious stones, cold and hard. The rest of the world, the impending party, the city below, disappeared. There was only his focused fury and the betrayal he had just absorbed on my behalf. Did he touch you? His voice was low, dangerously calm, like a riverbed before the tsunami. Only my hand. He tried. I swallowed, feeling the terror and attraction mixed. He offered me a fortune and a vice president role to betray you. He is working for Victor Sterling, his father. Elias took a step toward me, and his arms wrapped around me. It was not a comforting embrace, but an act of possession, an act of war. He held me so tightly I could feel the rhythm of his heart hammering against mine. The Sterlings violated the neutrality treaty. They used you. This is no error in judgment, he murmured against my hair. What are you going to do? I am going to remind them of the cost of interfering with what is mine. He pulled away, holding my face in his hands. His gaze was burning with an intensity that seared, but beneath the danger, there was a pure, visceral relief that I was back, unharmed. You came back to me. You did not betray me. I chose my side, Elias. I am not for sale. He kissed me quickly, an urgent, possessive touch on my forehead, and then the mask of coldness returned, denser than ever. The party starts in 15 minutes. You will compose yourself. You will walk into the marble room, and you will stay by my side all night. Not as an assistant, but as my partner. I want everyone to see who you belong to. Damien, he commanded, turning to the security chief, reinforce the entry and exit points. And send a message to Victor Sterling. Tell him he lost something important tonight, and he will have to pay for it. The marble room of the Gilded Archive Gallery was a spectacle of opulence and power. Crystal chandeliers reflected light over the polished floor, walls adorned with Titians and Caravaggios, and a black-tie crowd representing the wealthiest and often darkest elite of the international art market. I stood beside Elias, feeling the weight of my new status. I was no longer the discreet assistant, I was the woman in the emerald dress, the woman Elias had openly claimed the moment the party began. Elias was impeccable and icy in his black tuxedo. He was surrounded by negotiators, collectors, and representatives of the other families, smiling politely, but his forest green eyes were in constant motion, scanning the room with the intensity of a predator protecting his territory. His focus was not just security, but my proximity. The Sterlings are here, Elias murmured to me, his voice low, as he accepted a glass of champagne. Eric is with his father, Victor. They are near the Rodin sculpture. Victor is assessing the price of our mistake. I shivered. Do they know Eric was exposed? Not yet. But Victor knows he failed. I lost nothing, Cora. Victor did. His hand found the small of my back, the touch burning through the velvet of my dress, a constant reminder of his claim. The evening passed in a blur of introductions and tense exchanges. I was introduced not as Miss Vance, my assistant, but as Cora Vance, my principal advisor, an elevation in status that made many of the older guests blink. The wives of the collectors assessed me with a mixture of envy and caution. The men looked at me with blatant curiosity. In the center of the room, a quartet began a waltz, and the hall filled with swirling couples. Elias's grip on me intensified. You need to relax, he whispered, his voice strained. It is difficult to relax when one knows one is the center of a mob territorial dispute disguised as a charity event. You are with me. You are safe. No matter what happens, you are untouchable, he promised. It was then that Damien Hayes, Elias's director of security, who had stepped away to check the perimeter, returned. He saw us, and the surprise on his face gave way to immediate warmth. Cora, you are handling this better than any novice. You look beautiful tonight. That color, green, is definitely yours. He then turned to Elias, his tone returning to efficiency. Alex, the Munich representative, has an urgency regarding the manifest. Needs you now. Elias hesitated, the conflict visible in his face. He didn't want to leave me. Stay here, Cora. I will be fine. I'll get a sparkling water and wait here. The second Elias turned and walked away with Damien, Eric Sterling, who had been monitoring our movements from the corner of the room, saw his chance. He crossed the crowd with renewed confidence and stopped 6 feet from me, ignoring the fury in my eyes. Cora. Can we talk for a minute? Away from his eyes, he requested, his voice low, but urgently persuasive. I was about to coldly reject him when Damien, returning to our area, intercepted Eric. Sterling. Mr. Thorne requested Miss Vance stay put. Not a good time. I only need a minute, Damien. He's a college colleague. Don't be dramatic. At that moment, Damien glanced at the hall, then turned back to me with an apologetic smile. I apologize for the interruption, Cora. But I was ordered to keep you entertained while Elias is in combat. And the last time I checked, I was the best dancer on the team. He extended his hand. Dance with me, Cora. We'll give these vultures something to gossip about besides the price of silver. I hesitated. Refusing Damien, Elias's right-hand man, would be an insult. And dancing with him would be a public display that I was secure under Thorne protection. I accepted his hand. Damien led me onto the dance floor with unexpected grace, his large, warm hand resting on my waist. He was an excellent dancer, and I allowed myself to relax, laughing at a comment he made about negotiation stress. You are handling this better than any civilian would, Damien commented as we swirled elegantly under the crystal chandeliers. This world is overwhelming. I am surviving, I said, smiling. You are thriving. But I will tell you a secret Elias would never admit. Damien lowered his voice, the tone becoming confidential. I have known him since childhood, running around the family cellars. And I have never seen him so protective of anyone as he is of you. Not even. He trailed off, but the unspoken word hung in the air, Anastasia. He is my boss. It is professional concern, I argued, feeling my heart accelerate dangerously. Damien laughed, a sound that drew curious glances from nearby dancers. Gabriella, I am the head of security. I know the difference between professional concern and the look he gives when someone gets too close to what he has claimed as uniquely his. He watches you as if. His sentence died, and his eyes widened slightly, fixing on a point past my shoulder. Oh. This is going to get interesting. I felt the presence of Elias Thorne even before I saw him. The air in the hall seemed to freeze, the temperature dropping several degrees as he approached. Controlled fury radiated from him like a shockwave, causing guests to subtly move away. Damien. Elias's name was not a question, it was a command wrapped in black silk, a sound that could break bones. Damien's hands dropped from my waist immediately. Boss, we were just. I can see exactly what you were doing. Elias's voice remained perfectly level, which made it 1,000 times more threatening. His dark eyes fixed on me, the emerald dress now looking incandescent under his stare. Miss Vance, come with me. Now. He didn't wait for agreement, turning abruptly and heading for the only place of privacy remaining, the terrace. Damien gave me a look that mixed guilt and panic as I hurried to follow Elias, hyper-aware of all the curious stares tracking our dramatic exit from the dance floor. The terrace was cold, but the heat radiating from Elias's controlled fury was enough to warm me. He walked to the stone balustrade overlooking the glittering Manhattan view, his hands gripping the edge so hard his knuckles turned white. His tense shoulders looked capable of ripping the fine fabric of his tuxedo. I approached, feeling the need for clarity, despite the fear. Mr. Thorne, if I did something to offend you, it was by order of your own head of security. I was only. Did you enjoy dancing with Damien? He interrupted me, his voice low and hoarse, verging on violence. He turned to face me, and the raw emotion in his expression made me take an involuntary step back. This was not the rational art magnate. This was the territorial predator. It was just a dance, Elias. He was being kind and keeping me safe, as you ordered. Kind, he repeated slowly, each syllable laced with venom. Damien was being kind. And you were what? Refusing the attention I could not give in the middle of a territorial dispute. I don't understand why you are so angry, I countered, letting my own frustration flare. I just came back from a dinner where I was propositioned by a spy. I chose you. I warned you. I am your most loyal asset, and you reprimand me for dancing with your own security chief. You don't understand? He advanced, each step slow and deliberate, eliminating the distance between us. 8 months, Cora. 8 months of you in my office, cataloging my secrets, in my sight, in my mind, in my gallery. 8 months maintaining the appropriate distance, while I yearn for nothing more than. He stopped, his jaw clenched. My heart hammered against my ribs, the emerald velvet of my dress feeling tight. Alexander, he used my full name, the sound of command, a confession. You know how many men in that room watched you tonight? How many looked at you with the covetousness they reserve for an artifact they cannot have? How many looked at you in a way that only I have the right to look at what is mine? The possessiveness in his tone should have made me run. Instead, it sent a wave of electric, dangerous heat through my veins. I am not yours, Elias, I whispered, but my voice failed, betrayed by need. He leaned closer, his breath warm on my temple. You are not. Then why do you tremble under my gaze? Why does your pulse race when I say your name with my accent? Why did you seek me out the second you felt danger, dressed in that green the first chose, as if you were summoning me? I couldn't answer. The electricity between us was a force field. I cannot stand seeing you in another man's arms, he said, his voice now low and raw. The confession seemed to steal the last vestige of his control. Not Damien's, not anyone's. It takes everything in me not to walk into that hall and ensure everyone understands that you belong to me. This is not appropriate, I managed, though my body betrayed me by swaying toward him. You are my employer. There are boundaries. Boundaries? He laughed, the sound bitter. I have been clinging to those boundaries as if they were the walls of my prison cell. But seeing you tonight, in that dress I chose because it is the only thing that calms me amidst this chaos. Seeing another man hold you. His hand slid to my waist, pulling me against his hard, unforgiving body. I am done pretending those boundaries mean anything. The rational part of my brain screamed about the power differential and the foolishness. But there, with his arms around me, his green eyes burning with barely restrained desire, I couldn't care. What are you saying? My voice came out breathless. I am saying you are the first piece of art in my life I did not buy, but which has become priceless. I am saying you are the first thing I think about when I wake and the last thought before sleep. I have been trying to convince myself this is just proximity, just lust, but it is more than that. You have become necessary to me in ways that have nothing to do with the gallery. His thumb traced my hip. Tell me you don't feel this too, he demanded, his voice gravelly, and I will walk away. I will maintain all boundaries. But tell me the truth, Cora. Now. I looked up at him. This man, my dangerous boss, had become the focal point of my entire existence. The safe path was to reject him. The insane path was to succumb. I feel it, I whispered, my voice choked. God, help me. I feel it, Elias. Elias's fury instantly transformed into a fierce triumph. Then his mouth was on mine, claiming me, an explosion of 8 months of denial and tension. It was not a request, it was an act of possession, one hand tangling in my hair, the other holding me with unforgiving force against him. I surrendered to the kiss, the taste of whiskey and power, the scent of sandalwood and danger. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, Elias rested his forehead against mine. "This changes everything," he murmured. "I know there are things about my world, about the price of loyalty and fear, that you still don't understand. Things that could put you at risk just by association." I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "Then help me understand. No more secrets and half-truths. If we are doing this, I need total honesty." He studied my face for a long moment, and then nodded, accepting the new term of our relationship. "Tomorrow, come to my office, and I will tell you everything you need to know. But tonight," he traced my lower lip with his thumb. "Tonight, let me have this moment before the gallery demands my attention." He kissed me again, slower this time, complete and possessive. When we finally walked back into the marble room, I knew the line had been erased forever. I had chosen my side. And the cost of loving the magnate would be high. I barely slept that night. The memory of the terrace, the urgent, possessive taste of Elias's kiss, the rawness of his confession, all replayed in my mind in a vicious cycle. Every hour, I convinced myself that the night before had been a mistake, a lapse in judgment under pressure, and then talked myself back into wanting it, with an intensity that surpassed reason. Tuesday morning arrived with the cruel inevitability of a final auction deadline. I dressed in my usual work uniform, tailored pants and a silk blouse, this time in a pale gray shade, and tried to prepare for the version of Elias I would encounter. Would it be the man who kissed me breathless? Or the cold businessman who kept the world at arm's length? The office felt different when I arrived promptly at 8. The same elegant reception area, the same view of Manhattan spreading below. But the air itself was charged with a latent electricity, a promise of danger and possibility. I set down my bag at my desk and booted up my computer, forcing myself into the familiar routine of checking emails and confirming appointments. Elias's office door remained closed. His calendar showed he had arrived an hour earlier than usual, suggesting he was either actively avoiding me or dealing with the consequences of Eric Sterling's betrayal, which required privacy. I suspected a painful combination of both. At 9:15, the door finally opened. Elias emerged wearing an impeccably cut navy suit that fit him like armor, his expression carefully neutral, carved from marble. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second before he looked away, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly, a sign, I knew, that he was fighting against himself. "Miss Vance, good morning. The conference room should be set up for 10 o'clock with the Munich appraisers. Please confirm the Earl Grey tea and mineral water have arrived." Miss Vance, not Cora. The formality was a sharp blade and stung more than it should have. "Of course, Mr. Thorne. Everything is arranged," I replied with the same professional distance, forcing my heart to slow down. He nodded once and retreated back into his office, the door closing with a soft click that felt remarkably like a barrier being erected. I stared at the dark wood, emotions warring between hurt and understanding. He had promised me honesty today. Explanations about his world and the dangers I didn't fully comprehend. Perhaps this distance was his way of maintaining control until we could have that crucial conversation. The morning crawled by with agonizing slowness. The meeting with the Munich appraisers went smoothly. A discussion about the legality of a Roman coin shipment that required my document translation precision more than my strategic presence. I sat in the corner, taking notes, hyper-aware of Elias at the head of the table. He commanded the room effortlessly, switching between English and Italian, negotiating terms with the kind of intellectual coldness that had nothing to do with the passion of the terrace. But I noticed the small tells, how he shifted slightly whenever I spoke, how his fingers drummed once against the table when one of the appraisers complimented my organization, and how his gaze would start to drift toward me before he forcibly redirected it to the documents and projections. He was fighting an internal war. When the appraisers finally left, Satisfied with the preliminary paperwork, Elias gathered his materials without looking at me. "Thank you for your assistance, Miss Vance. That will be all for now." The dismissal was clear, a cold rejection. I returned to my desk, feeling frustrated, uncertain whether I should push for the conversation he had promised or give him space to work through the conflict that was clearly consuming him. The tension between the man who kissed me and the boss who ignored me was almost unbearable. It was 2:30 p.m. when Damian Hayes, the director of security, appeared in the reception area. He carried a cup of coffee from our favorite Italian spot. He set one cup on my desk with a smile that mixed apology and complicity. "Peace offering for getting you into that hellish dance last night." "You didn't get me into trouble," I said, accepting the coffee. "I am a grown woman who chose to dance with you." "Yeah, but I knew exactly what the boss's reaction would be," he retorted, sitting in one of the leather armchairs across from my desk, stretching his long legs. "Seeing him like that, Cora? That jealousy wasn't public show. That was real. Is he regretting it today?" "No. He's terrified of what he feels." Damian shot a significant glance toward Elias's closed door, then lowered his voice to a whisper barely above the hum of the air conditioning. "Look, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but you deserve the context, especially after what Eric Sterling tried last night." Damian took a deep breath, the air around him becoming immediately heavier and serious. "About 6 months ago, things got really complicated. It's not just normal auction competition. There's a faction, the Eastern Consortium, led by a guy named Volkov. They've been pushing hard for control over the rare artifact shipping routes the Thorne Gallery uses, the routes that keep Elias on top. 3 of our intermediaries have already been eliminated in accidents in recent months." My stomach clenched. "Eliminated how?" "Volkov doesn't follow the codes of honor. He uses brute force and terror. They are targeting people close to the leadership. Family members, key associates. And now, potential partners." Damian took a sip of coffee. "The Sterlings have ties to the Volkovs, Cora. That's why Eric tried to buy you. They want the Von Hess collection. And they want to use you as leverage." The realization hit me like a shockwave. That's why Elias mentioned security at the party. That's why he had men monitoring my building since last month, even before the kiss. Discreet surveillance to ensure no one from Volkov's crew got too interested. Damian's blue eyes, usually full of sarcasm, were now loaded with sympathy. "Exactly. Elias has been trying to keep a safe distance from you for your own protection. Last night, when he saw you, dressed in the emerald green he bought, dancing with me, every defense he built for himself just crumbled. Why didn't anyone tell me I was being watched? Because you would have reacted exactly as you are now. Scared, angry, and questioning if this game is worth it. Elias didn't want you to have to make that choice under pressure." Damian leaned in even closer, his voice becoming a painful confession. "You need to understand his history, Cora. Elias's first wife, Anastasia, died 5 years ago in what was classified as an accident. Her boat sank near the Italian coast on a stormy night. But Elias never believed it was a weather accident. He believes it was retaliation for a deal he was about to close. And he carries that guilt every day." My throat tightened. He loved her. He did. And when she died, a part of him shut down completely. He spent 4 years living on routine and revenge, until you showed up 8 months ago, with your impeccable organization and your insistence on subtly challenging him. He came back to himself. He started to care again, Cora. And that terrifies him, because caring about you makes you vulnerable, and in Elias's world, vulnerability is a death sentence. I processed the information. The friction points connected. The overprotectiveness that seemed excessive for an assistant. The possessive jealousy that exploded on the terrace. The conflict I heard in his voice when he admitted wanting me. So, what should I do with this information? That choice is yours. But if you are going to be part of his life, you need to understand what that means. This world is not safe, Gabriella. It's war disguised as an auction. People become weaknesses that can be exploited. Damien stood, adjusting his blazer. Elias promised you honesty. When he finally gives it to you, listen carefully, and decide if you can handle what comes with loving a man who lives on the dark side of power. Elias's office door opened, and he emerged, his expression strained. Damien, I need you. The Sterling shipping routes just had a complication. He looked at me, his expression returning to professional. Miss Vance, 5 minutes. He didn't need to tell me that the promised honesty was about to happen. The door to Elias's office closed behind us, and the sound of the click was an abrupt cut between the outside world and the bubble of tension surrounding us. He didn't invite me to sit in the formal chairs. Instead, he went straight to the whiskey bar. He poured 2 glasses, filled with a heavy dose of the amber drink, and handed me one without asking. It was a gesture that recognized the gravity of the situation. I was no longer the assistant, I was his partner in danger. Damien spoke to you, he stated, not looking at me, picking up his own glass. It wasn't a question. He gave me context, Elias. Information about threats I didn't know existed, the surveillance I didn't realize, and the name of your first wife. I took a sip of the whiskey, letting it burn down my throat. Then you already know I am a liar, a hypocrite, and a coward, he replied, finally turning to face me. His green eyes were raw, stripped of his usual armor. I should have told you. But every instinct screamed to keep you at a distance, to keep you deluded with the idea that I was just an eccentric businessman. Why didn't I tell you the truth, Cora? Because knowing would make me a more conscious target, and because you were afraid I would leave, I said, holding his gaze firmly, even as my heart ached with the honesty of my own statement. He nodded slowly. Exactly. Because knowing makes you the most dangerous thing in my life, but also the only irreplaceable thing. He took a sip of his whiskey. You need to understand, Cora. When Anastasia was gone, I didn't just feel grief. I felt guilt. I brought her into this life, promised she would be safe, and my choices killed her. With you, I love who I chose, not who I was obligated to love. That makes you my greatest weakness. My absolute vulnerability. He placed the glass on the table with a dull thud, his voice lowering to an intense whisper. I would burn down half this city before allowing Volkov or Sterling to touch you, but the fury in my heart does not make you less vulnerable, it only makes me more blind to the risk. Elias, you need to stop trying to protect me by pushing me away. I approached, the electricity between us, despite the gravity of the conversation, was undeniable. I know this is your world. It is violent, it is immoral, and it has a high price. But you have been dragging me into it since the day you hired me. I went to the terrace last night. I chose you the moment I came back to this gallery and not home. His eyes met mine with devastating honesty. You became the reason I want to go legitimate. You are the proof that there is something beyond control and revenge. But, Cora, you need to accept the consequences. Being near me means constant armed security, it means vetting every person in your life, it means looking over your shoulder and questioning every motive. It means my enemies will see you as the only way to destroy me. He reached out and held my hand, his thumb tracing patterns on my palm. And if you say now that this frightens you, that you want to leave, that I relocate you with money, identity, and security anywhere in the world, I will do it. Without resentment. I am selfish enough to hope you stay, but I will not steal your freedom of choice. I looked at him, at the man who was willing to risk his empire for me and, at the same time, was willing to let me go to save myself. The safe choice was to run. But the normal life I had lived before him seemed now gray, incomplete. I am not going anywhere, I said, my voice clear and firm. But I have conditions. Enough with protecting me through ignorance. If we are doing this, we do it together. You tell me the threats, you treat me as your strategic partner, and not as a fragile possession. A slow, triumphant smile, yet laden with relief, spread across his face. That goes against every instinct I have, Carissima. Then you will have to learn new instincts. I pulled him into an embrace. The strength of my body against his was a promise, an affirmation. We sat there for long minutes, the whiskey untouched and the silence filled with the acceptance of a dangerous, yet shared, future. Tomorrow, he murmured, his voice deep in my hair, we will begin dismantling Victor Sterling and Andrei Volkov. But tonight, we will have dinner at my apartment. No security in sight, just the two of us. You have to give me the chance to be just Elias for one night. It was 9 a.m. on Wednesday, and Elias's office had been transformed into a war room. Maps of shipping routes and diagrams of auction chains filled the wall smart screen. Joseph and Damien, along with Marco, the logistics specialist, were gathered, and I, as promised, was seated at the table, not with a notebook, but with my tablet open, ready to contribute. The Sterlings do not have the capacity to operate independently against us or against Volkov, Elias began, leaning his hands on the table, his green eyes fixed on the Sterling family diagram. The attempt to use Cora to obtain the Von Hess information proves desperation and incompetence. But Victor Sterling would not act without the support of someone bigger. Volkov, Damien confirmed, casting a harsh glance at the door. They are providing the resources and the violence. Sterling provides the facade and the privileged information from inside the Western Consortium. Exactly, Elias nodded. Volkov wants control of the routes. Sterling wants the prestige and money of being the legal intermediary. They tried to use Cora as leverage and failed. Now, we turn the tables. Elias turned to me. Gabriella, your intuition about Eric's failure is crucial. Eric is vain. He will be our first leverage. But Victor Sterling is the real problem, I interjected. He is the only one who can formalize a pact with Volkov. Eric is just a luxury pawn. Correct. And that's why Victor has a weakness. Elias gestured to Marco, who projected a financial profile and a photograph onto the screen. Victor has a younger son, Julian Sterling. He's not in the family business, but he has developed some expensive habits in Monaco. Gambling debts that keep growing. My stomach turned cold. The tactic was cold, but recognizable. Exploit someone's vulnerability to achieve power. Are you thinking of blackmailing him? I am thinking of giving Victor a choice, based on blood loyalty, Elias corrected, his voice dangerously neutral. If Julian is used for extortion, Victor gives in to Volkov's pressure or he turns to Elias to solve the debt. Marco interjected, but Volkov already has his own intermediary within our operations. The information leak is not just Sterling. Someone in the gallery is feeding Volkov with operational data. Elias nodded, and his gaze turned to a name on the diagram he had kept in the shadow, Dr. Alistair Rinaldi, the gallery's chief curator and appraiser, a man with access to all acquisitions, including Von Hess. Does Dr. Alistair have debts? I asked. No, Elias replied. But he has a daughter. Sophia Rinaldi. She is in her second year of college in Milan. Last month, she was detained in a minor incident that was quickly hushed up. Possession of controlled substances and assault. Volkov, or rather, his agents, were involved. Alistair believes he solved the problem by paying a heavy fine. He doesn't know Volkov keeps her file. The terror of the situation was the precision with which Volkov exploited personal weaknesses. "It's the same tactic as Victor," I observed, my voice low. "Using family to force commitment." "My hands are not clean, Gabriella. I am no saint." Elias faced me. "But Volkov is using the fragility of the allied families to destroy us. Alistair is under pressure to provide information about our safest routes. If he is being blackmailed instead of acting out of genuine disloyalty, he can be convinced to work for you," I suggested, recalling my own experience. "If you remove the threat to his daughter, he can become a double agent, feeding Volkov misinformation." Elias's eyes gleamed with cold, calculating intelligence. "That is the play. Volkov needs insider information to attack. If Alistair feeds him false information about the Von Hess transport routes, Volkov will waste his resources, and we will know exactly where he is positioning himself." "But Alistair is an academic," Joseph warned. "He is emotional. It is risky." "He is more valuable as a frightened, cooperative curator than dead," Elias decreed. "And the gallery needs its chief curator. Gabriella, you have the best working relationship with Alistair. You will coordinate his risk removal and recruitment. Marco, arrange for the payment of Julian Sterling's debt. And Damien, prepare Alistair for the most important conversation of his life. The war would not be fought with gunshots, at least not initially. It would be fought with secrets, weaknesses, and the manipulation of family ties." And I was at the center of it all, side by side with Elias Thorne. It was a gray Wednesday when Dr. Alistair Rinaldi, the gallery's chief curator, arrived at Elias's midtown penthouse. He was escorted by two of Damien's men, who looked perfectly capable of applying physical persuasion if necessary. The curator's face was pale, sweat beaded on his temples, despite the mild room temperature. He knew why he had been summoned. Elias gestured toward one of the leather armchairs in the living room, devoid of any cordiality. "Sit down, Alistair." I stood near the window, pretending to organize the lighting control on my tablet, but actually observing every tremor and nuance of the interaction. This was the confrontation Elias had been building toward for 2 weeks, the disarming of the internal time bomb. "Mr. Thorne, I can explain." "I swear I can." "Then explain." Elias's voice was dangerously calm, like the surface of a frozen lake. "Explain why you provided false shipping data for the Scandinavian collection last month. Explain the encrypted communications with unknown numbers. Explain why you have been feeding operational information to Andrei Volkov's organization for the past 3 months." Alistair's face crumbled. "They have my daughter," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Not kidnapped, but they own her. Gambling debts she accrued in Milan. A fabricated criminal record for possession that they can reactivate at any time. $300,000 she owes to their loan sharks. They said if I didn't cooperate, they would make her disappear. Why didn't you come to me, Alistair?" Elias's question was sharp, cutting to the core of the loyalty code. "Because I was ashamed. Because I have worked for the Thorne family for 15 years, and I allowed my foolish daughter's mistake to become the gallery's problem. I never gave you anything that would harm you directly. Just operational details, scheduling, what seemed to be low-value intelligence." The curator was visibly trembling. "I am ready to accept whatever consequences you deem appropriate. But please, spare Sophia. She is weak, but she doesn't deserve to die for my mistakes." The silence that followed stretched for long, agonizing moments. I could see Elias weighing the options, calculating between punishment and utility. In his world, betrayal deserved one response. But he had promised himself that, for my sake, he would try to learn new instincts. Finally, Elias spoke. His voice was low, yet charged with cold authority. "I will offer you a choice, Alistair. You can leave this penthouse in a car that will take you forever out of New York, into a new identity, but penniless. Or you can leave here as a double agent working for me. Alistair's eyes widened. What? The $300,000 your daughter owes? I will pay it. She will be cleared, and I will ensure Volkov can no longer use her file. And, in exchange, you will continue to feed Volkov's people information. Except that, from now on, the information you provide will be carefully curated by me. You will help us win this war and, in exchange, your daughter lives, and you keep your position. Why would you do this? Because you are more valuable to me alive and cooperative than dead, Elias decreed, standing up and circling the desk to lean near the armchair, casting an imposing shadow. And because your betrayal came from desperation, not greed, which means you can potentially be trusted if I remove the source of that desperation. Elias leaned in, and his eyes fixed on Alistair's with glacial intensity. But understand this clearly, Doctor. If you betray me again, if you warn Volkov about this agreement, if you do anything except exactly what I tell you, your daughter dies first. Slowly. And only then you. Are we clear? Crystal clear, Mr. Thorne. I swear on my family's life, I won't let you down. You already let me down once. Don't make it twice. Elias gestured to one of the security guards. Damien, take him to Joseph. They will coordinate the double game. As soon as Alistair was escorted out, trembling but alive, I walked up to Elias, the whiskey in my hand untouched. That was strategic, I commented. And an act of mercy that the Elias of before would not have allowed. It was strategic, he corrected, turning to me, his expression returning to vulnerable. Paolo knows things about Volkov's operation now, including how they communicate. But more importantly, during his initial recruitment, Victor Sterling boasted of something crucial. I felt my pulse quicken. What? He boasted of how he took leadership of his faction. He said his mentor, the former Baron, was weak, too willing to negotiate with the Western Consortium. So, Victor orchestrated an accident that looked like a yacht engine failure. But, in fact, it was sabotage through family betrayal. Elias pulled up encrypted files on his tablet. In their culture, killing one's own family to seize power is the ultimate violation of the Code of Honor. If proven, the penalty is execution by the hands of his own people. I understood. That is the leverage you need. Not total war. But the delegitimization of Volkov. Exactly. Victor boasts of having kept the documentation, bank transfers, communications, even a recorded confession he uses to ensure the loyalty of his lieutenants. If we can locate that evidence, we win this war without firing a shot. The coldness of the strategy was seductive. And I was standing right there, beside him, no longer the terrified secretary, but the partner who would help draw the map. 2 days after Alistair's forced recruitment, Elias informed me we would be traveling to Atlantic City. It is not a typical business trip, he explained, the tension visible in his shoulders. Our ally, Marco Duca's nephew, was found dead this morning, dumped in the New York harbor. Victor Sterling raised the level of terror. The 5 major Allied families must meet to decide if the plan is all-out war or surrender. I need your presence. I am coming with you, I affirmed, without hesitation. Elias opened his mouth to argue, the concern in his eyes more eloquent than any words. He knew the meeting was a potential target. That is exactly why you need to take me. Leaving me here while you negotiate shows weakness and fear of protecting your assets. Taking me demonstrates confidence that Thorne security can handle any threat. Furthermore, I crossed my arms, assuming the posture he had taught me. You said I have good instincts about people. Use them. Let me observe these leaders and tell you what I notice. A slow, appreciative smile, the kind that made my heart skip a beat, spread across Elias's face. You have become a formidable strategist, Cora Vance. I pay attention, Elias. And this is my life now too. He nodded. Pack for the overnight. We leave tomorrow at noon. Separate floors. Atlantic City, in late November, was cold and windswept, a grim backdrop for a war summit. The hotel Elias chose was classic old money luxury, all marble and gold fixtures. True to his principles, he booked us rooms on different floors. That night, dressed for the formal dinner in a deep plum dress that hugged my curves, I found Elias waiting in the hallway. You look stunning, he said, his gaze sweeping over me with a heat that made me blush. You clean up nicely yourself. He wore a charcoal gray suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, and he offered his arm. I took it, feeling his solid strength beneath the expensive fabric. The private dining room held a long table set for 12. 5 family heads, with their seconds, and us. I recognized most of them, Salvatore Santoro with his calculating eyes, Antonio Greco, whose Brooklyn operations ran like clockwork, and the feared Teresa Vitali, the only woman leading a family, whose operations she had ruthlessly seized and expanded after her husband's death. Alexander, Teresa said, her sharp gaze fixing on me. You brought your assistant to a strategic discussion. I brought my most trusted advisor, Elias corrected smoothly. Miss Vance has insights that have proven invaluable. Salvatore Santoro snorted. Your most trusted advisor is young enough to be your daughter and pretty enough to be a distraction. I felt Elias tense beside me, but before he could respond, I took the lead. Actually, Mr. Santoro, I am 28. Old enough to have served as Mr. Thorne's executive assistant for almost a year, coordinating the logistics for most of your dealings with him. Perhaps you would prefer I retire so you can continue making assumptions about women based on appearance rather than competence. A deadly silence fell over the room. Then Teresa Vitali laughed, the sound sharp and approving. I like her. She stays. The dinner began with the expected posturing. Each family leader advocated a different approach to the Victor Sterling/Volkov problem. Salvatore pushed for an immediate military response. Antonio preferred economic warfare. The discussion grew heated, with old grudges and competing interests surfacing. Antonio and Marco, in particular, clashed, their families disputing borders for years. Your problem, Marco, is that you've always overextended, Antonio snapped. And your problem is cowardice disguised as pragmatism, Marco shot back. Gentlemen, I said calmly, and somehow, my voice cut through the noise. Everyone turned to look at me. If I may offer a historical perspective. Elias nodded, curiosity in his expression. In 1282, the Sicilian Vespers began because the French occupation of Sicily bred resentment. But what triggered the rebellion wasn't unified hatred. It was a specific incident involving a French soldier and a Sicilian woman that gave desperate factions a common cause. The rebellion succeeded because they agreed on the immediate priority, removing the foreign threat before addressing internal disputes. I had their attention. Victor Sterling is your foreign threat. He does not respect your codes, your traditions, or your territories. He killed a 16-year-old boy to make his point. If you cannot set aside internal disagreements long enough to remove him, you are essentially handing him victory. He will pick you off one family at a time while you argue about borders and principles. Marco Duca leaned back in his chair. The girl makes a valid point. The girl has a name, Teresa said dryly, with a wry smile. And she is right. We eliminate Victor first. Then we can go back to our usual bickering. The mood in the room shifted. The discussion became constructive, focused on strategy. By the time dessert arrived, they had forged a temporary alliance with clear terms, shared intelligence, coordinated security, and unified economic pressure on Volkov's operations until Victor Sterling could be neutralized. Elias's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently in tacit acknowledgement of what I had accomplished. The dinner finally ended near midnight, and we walked back to the elevators in comfortable silence. On my floor, Elias followed me out. "That was remarkable," he said, as we walked down the hallway. "You defused a situation that was minutes away from complete breakdown. You read the room perfectly and found exactly the right angle to redirect their focus. You were perfect tonight, Gabriella. I had a good teacher." His hand rose to cut my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. "I keep trying to maintain the appropriate distance, keep trying to be noble and patient. But watching you tonight, seeing you hold your own against men with 10 times your experience, all I could think about was how much I want you." My breath hitched. "Then take me." "Are you sure? Truly sure? Because once I cross this line, there is no turning back for me." I pulled his face down to mine, answering with a kiss that contained nothing but certainty. 9 months of tension and denial exploded in that contact. Desperate, claiming, and absolutely certain. We broke apart just long enough for me to fumble my key card into the lock. The door barely closed behind us before Elias had me pressed against it, his mouth on mine and his hands tangling in my hair. The door closed with a muffled thud, isolating us from the cold luxury of the hallway and the threat looming over the city. Elias pressed me against the wood, his mouth on mine with an urgency that was not just desire, but relief and possession. 9 months of pent-up tension, codes of conduct, and professional denial exploded in that contact. He lifted me by the waist, and I wrapped my legs around him, the silk of my party dress slipping beneath his hands. The kiss was famished, a brutal acknowledgement that we had waited too long, risked too much, and that patience was exhausted. "I love you," he murmured against my lips, the words raw and unspoken, but intensely felt. "I have loved you for months and tried to deny it because loving you made you vulnerable, but I can't pretend anymore." "I love you, too," I gasped, as his lips moved to the curve of my neck. "I think I've loved you since that first month, when you remembered my coffee with milk and had it waiting on my desk before I arrived." He pulled back just enough to look into my eyes, which were brimming with emotion and exhaustion. "You brought light back into my life, Gabriella. Before you, I was just existing, building an empire that meant nothing because there was no one to share it with. You made me want to live again." Elias didn't move toward the bed. Instead, he spun us around, and pressed me back against the room's mirror wall. He tore away the formality of his suit, his fingers working with precision at the clasp of my dress, but his eyes never left mine. There was respect and reverence in his desire, but also the relentless possessiveness of a man who was finally claiming what was his. The deep plum dress fell to the floor. The cool air of the room contrasted with the heat of his skin beneath his white shirt. His eyes widened in ravenous admiration. "You are a masterpiece. The only priceless thing in a world of forgeries," he whispered, and then kissed me, his mouth on my shoulder, my collarbone, my skin. The act of love was explosive and total. It wasn't just lust. It was the final dismantling of barriers, the mutual acceptance of danger. Elias was demanding, yet perfectly attentive, guiding me through the passion with the same precision he used to negotiate a cargo. "Manifest." He marked me as his, not with haste, but with the patient certainty that, now that we had crossed the line, there would be no going back. Later, we lay tangled in the cool silk sheets, the flickering light of Atlantic City filtering through the window. My head was nestled on his shoulder, my body rested, and my heart in a strange peace, despite the threat that lingered. I heard what he said, I told him softly, remembering Victor Santoro's scorn at dinner. "What?" "His scorn for me being a distraction. They view women in your world as assets or liabilities. Nothing more." Elias's arms tightened around me, the strength of his embrace a promise, an oath. You are not an asset, Gabriella. You are my purpose. Everything I did tonight, the agreement, the alliance, it was all to ensure you could have a safe future by my side. But what if I am a weakness? Weakness is fear. You are fearless. You are my strength. The woman who can stand at that table, quote Sicilian history, and put fear into men who govern fortunes. That is not weakness. That is my queen. He turned me to face him, and his gaze was one of deep, calm possession. I know this is my world. And I know you chose it tonight, despite everything. That gives me the hope I lost when Anastasia was gone. I did not lose you to a spy. I did not lose you to the war. You chose me. And I will never let you regret it. The kiss he gave me then was slow, deep, and full of relief that we had both survived to see tomorrow. That night, we became what we had been fighting against for months, not employer and assistant, but two equals, irreversibly and completely in love. The return to New York after the Atlantic City summit was wrapped in a final tension, yet charged with triumph. Elias did not leave my side for a second. That night, we returned to the penthouse, and the space that was once protective isolation now felt, for the first time, truly home. The next 2 days were a blur of strategy and surgical moves. Elias worked 18-hour days, coordinating with the allied families, positioning resources, and laying the groundwork for what he called the final move. I watched him transform, the man who kissed me with tenderness becoming a cold, implacable general commanding an empire. The plan culminated in a meeting in a warehouse, overseen by the Greco family. Through Paolo, the curator Alistair, Elias leaked controlled information to Victor Sterling, suggesting the Thornes were finally willing to negotiate territorial terms after the cost of continued conflict. On the night of the meeting, Elias insisted I stay at a secondary location, a top-secret surveillance room in Midtown. Joseph commanded my security detail. Elias fitted a small earpiece into my ear. You will be able to hear everything. But if the signal drops or you hear gunfire, Joseph gets you out immediately. No arguments. I am not taking unnecessary risks. I will be here, I promised, holding the collar of his tuxedo. Come back to me. Always. The kiss he gave me was an oath. In the surveillance room, I watched the scene unfold in the warehouse. Victor Sterling arrived with his lieutenants, exuding arrogant confidence. The conversation began with Victor demanding territories and, finally, demanding the girl to ensure Elias honored the agreement. My blood ran cold, but Elias's voice remained perfectly controlled. She is not part of any negotiation. Propose different terms. Victor laughed, confident of his impending victory. It was then that Elias, with the calm of a sniper, pulled a slim folder from his jacket. Before we continue negotiations, there is something you should see. Victor opened the folder. Even through the grainy camera feed, I could see his face contort with fury and, finally, sheer terror. The folder contained the evidence, bank transfers, communications, and the testimony that proved Victor had murdered his own mentor, the former Baron, to seize power, the ultimate violation of the Code of Honor. The Council of Elders will not be pleased to see this, Elias's voice cut through my earpiece. I have already sent copies. I offer you a choice, Victor. Permanent exile in Brazil, with funds for a comfortable life, away from politics, or I release this evidence publicly, and your own people execute you for blood betrayal. The confrontation did not end with gunshots, but with a cold, terrifying calculation. Victor, betrayed by his own vanity, accepted exile. Alexander won the war through strategy and intelligence, not carnage. Minutes after the audio signal was restored and Victor was escorted away to detention, Elias burst into the surveillance room. I didn't wait for explanations. I leaped into his arms, wrapping my body around his neck. I couldn't hear you, I said, breathless. I thought I had lost you. I'm here. I'm safe. It's over, he murmured against my hair, holding me with the strength of a man who had just recovered his only irreplaceable thing. You are safe now. No more threats. No more secrets. He pulled away and held my face, his green eyes fixed on mine. Victor wanted you to destabilize me. He saw me as a man who had grown too attached. He saw you as my weakness. But he made the fatal mistake of underestimating you. You are not my weakness, Gabriella. You are my foundation. The following months were a blur of reconstruction. Victor Sterling was exiled, and the Volkov organization fragmented without his support. Alexander called a meeting of the Allied families 2 weeks later, and when I entered the conference room, he guided me to the chair beside him, not the assistant's chair. Miss Vance, he announced to the gathered leaders, has proven invaluable. I am elevating her position from executive assistant to senior strategic consultant with full participation in all planning discussions. Salvatore Santoro, who had scorned my presence, nodded slowly. The girl who quoted Sicilian history to us deserves recognition. She stays. Elias began the slow, expensive process of whitewashing his business facade. He bought an elegant brownstone in the Upper West Side, a real home, without the trappings of a fortress. He converted the third bedroom into a studio for my painting, filling it with light and materials. On a warm evening in early May, Alexander led me to our new garden, illuminated by candles. He was nervous, an emotion I had never seen from him before. Gabriella Mitchell, he took both my hands and his eyes held mine with devastating devotion. 10 months ago, you walked into my life and changed everything. You brought light to a darkness I had been living in for years. You showed me that power without purpose is meaningless, that love is worth more than territory or respect, or any of the things I spent my life pursuing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart leaped. You have seen the worst parts of me, the violence, the coldness, the fear I carry from loss, and you chose to stay anyway. Not out of coercion or fear, but because you saw something in me worth loving despite all the reasons you shouldn't. He opened the box, revealing an antique, family Asher-cut diamond ring. This belonged to my grandmother. She wore it for 60 years of marriage to a difficult man in a dangerous world. She was the strongest woman I knew until I met you. Tears were streaming down my face now. He took the ring from the box and held it ready. Marry me, Gabriella. Make this official. Build this life with me permanently, knowing exactly what you are committing to. Give me the honor of being your husband and spending the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. Yes, I said, my voice choked with emotion. Yes, you impossible, dangerously perfect man. Yes. He slid the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly, because, of course, he had somehow determined my size without me noticing. Then he pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could feel his heart racing against my chest. I love you, he murmured against my hair. More than I thought possible. More than is probably wise. You are my entire world. I love you, too. Everything about you, even the complicated parts, especially the complicated parts because they made you who you are. We stayed like that for long moments, wrapped in each other and the weight of the commitment we had just made. Eventually, Alexander pulled back and gestured to the empty living room floor. Dance with me. There is no music, so we'll make our own. He pulled me close, one hand on my waist, the other holding mine. And we swayed to silence and heartbeats and the sound of the city filtering through the windows. No jealousy this time. No interruptions from coppos or business emergencies. Just two people who had found each other despite impossible circumstances. Choosing to build something lasting from passion and partnership and profound understanding. I thought about that first night at the party, when Alexander had exploded with jealousy watching me dance with Damien. How far we had traveled from that moment of possessive anger to this moment of secure commitment. The journey had been violent and terrifying and beautiful all at once. I would do it all again. Every dangerous moment, every terrifying choice, because it led here, to you, to us. Even knowing what I know now about your world, especially knowing what I know. He kissed me then, slow and deep, and full of promise. And dancing there in our living room with my engagement ring catching the candlelight, I understood that happily ever after didn't mean perfect. It meant choosing each other every day despite complexity and danger and all the reasons love shouldn't work. We had built something real from impossible circumstances. A partnership forged in crisis and strengthened by absolute honesty. And whatever came next, whatever challenges the future held, we would face them together. Not as boss and assistant, not as protector and protected, but as equals who had seen each other at our worst and chosen love anyway. The music we danced to existed only between us. But it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The end.